All right, class, good morning. Today we are going to learn about inferences and what those are, how we use them, and how to make inferences while we're reading a story. So the materials we're going to need today are notebook paper, pencil, and a book of your choice, whether that's your AR book, your personal reading book, or one that you find from our bookshelf over in the class. I'll give you guys a few seconds to go get that stuff ready, and then we'll get started. All right, it looks like everyone's ready to go. So first we're going to review our background knowledge. So who can tell me what predicting is? Yeah, go ahead.
Predicting is guessing what is going to happen.
That's right. The dictionary defines it as say or estimate that a specific thing will happen in the future or will be a consequence of something. What kind of questions do you ask while you read? Anyone want to share a few that they use? Yeah, go ahead.
What does this mean?
It's a good one. What else?
Where does it take place?
Also an important question. It helps tell us the setting of where the book takes place or whatever it is that we're reading. Anyone want to share one more?
What's going to happen next?
That is a really good question because that's going to help us learn about what inferences are. It's close to predicting, and we'll find out the difference here in a moment. So now we're going to preview our lesson for the day. So what is an inference? An inference is a conclusion made from text clues and what you already know. So you're taking our background knowledge, which we just talked about, and then taking the clues that we get from the text, putting them together and making sort of an educated guess. It's not something that is said, but something that we can assume based on the evidence that we have from the text clues. However, it's important to know that predicting is something that might or might not happen, whereas inferring is a thought process that goes on while you read using the evidence. So it's something that you think about, and you think about why would this happen, how would it happen, etc. So why do we infer? That's a good question to ask ourselves. We infer to better understand what we are reading at the time. It improves our skills in drawing conclusions, and it helps us to read between the lines, so to speak, and understood what is being implied. All right, so now I will read 2 pages from our class book, Where the Red Fern Grows. I will ask myself questions out loud and then fill in my inference organizer to show how it works. I'll pull it up so that you guys can all see. Okay, so here's the inference organizers that we're going to be using today, and I'll first demonstrate how we're going to use it. So, from our book, Where the Red Fern Grows. There sure is, Papa, I said. He's in that hollow limb. See that one way up there? That's why I couldn't come home. I was afraid he'd get away. So, something we already know is that Billy told his dogs prior to this page that he would catch a raccoon. Some words from the text that we just read was that's why I couldn't come home. I was afraid he would get away. So an inference that I might make is that there's a raccoon in the tree. Now we read to find out. Maybe you just think he's there, Papa said. I believe I'd make sure before I'd cut down a tree that big. Oh, he's there all right, I said. My dogs weren't 10 feet behind him when he went up it. Why are you so determined to get this coon? Papa asked. Couldn't you go somewhere else and tree one? Maybe the tree would be a smaller one. I thought about that, Papa, I said. But I made a bargain with my dogs. I told them that if they would put one in a tree, I would do the rest. Well, they fulfilled their part of the bargain. Now it's up to me to do my part, and I'm going to, Papa. I'm going to cut it down. I don't care if it takes me a year. Papa laughed and said, Oh, I don't think it'll take that long, but it will take a while. I'll tell you what I'll do. You take the mule and go get some breakfast. I'll chop on it until you get back. No, Papa, I said. I don't want any help. I want to cut it down all by myself. You see, if someone helped me, I wouldn't feel like I kept my part of the agreement. An astonished look came over my father's face. "Why, Billy," he said, "you can't stay down here without anything to eat and no sleep. Besides, it'll take at least 2 days to cut that tree down, and that's hard work." "Please, Papa," I begged, "don't make me quit. I just have to get that coon. If I don't, my dogs won't ever believe in me again." Papa didn't know what to tell me. He scratched his head and looked over to my dogs. So something we already know is that Billy wants to chop down the tree himself. We see that in these 2 pages. Some words from the text is him saying, "I just have to get that coon." So an inference I might make is that Billy is trying to be independent and do things for himself and show his dogs and his father, who's Papa, that he can do it on his own. All right, does anyone have any questions? Okay, so why don't you take out the notebook paper I had you grab out earlier, and on the piece of paper, I want you to define what an inference is in your own words. I will come around and check off and assist whoever might need any help. All right, everyone did a really great job. Now let's move on. So next we're going to do guided practice. So we're going to do this one together. So take out a pencil and put your name on the organizer. I hand it out to you guys right away. All right, today we're going to be reading Ruby the Copycat. Monday was Ruby's first day in Miss Hart's class. "Class, this is Ruby," announced Miss Hart. "Ruby, you may use the empty desk behind Angela. Angela is the girl with the pretty red bow in her hair." Angela smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Angela's bow and tiptoed to her seat. "I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend," said Miss Hart. "Does anyone have something to share?" "I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding," said Angela. "That's exciting," said Miss Hart. Ruby raised her hand halfway. "I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding, too." "What a coincidence," said Miss Hart. Angela turned and smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at the top of Angela's head. "Class, please take out your reading books," said Miss Hart. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped all the way home on one foot. When Ruby came back to school, she was wearing a red bow in her hair. She slid into her seat behind Angela. "I like your bow," whispered Angela. "I like yours too," whispered Ruby. "Class, please take out your math books," said Miss Hart. On Tuesday morning, Angela wore a sweater with daisies on it. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways. When Ruby came back to school after lunch, she was wearing a sweater with daisies on it. "I like your sweater," whispered Angela. "I like yours too," whispered Ruby. On Wednesday, Angela wore a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. After lunch, Ruby hopped back to school wearing a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. "Why are you sitting like that?" whispered Angela. "Wet paint," said Ruby. On Thursday morning, during sharing time, Angela modeled the flower girl dress she wore at her sister's wedding. Ruby modeled her flower girl dress too, right after lunch. Angela didn't whisper anything. All right, so why do you think Ruby chose to copy Angela? Why don't you do a think, pair, share with someone next to you? All right, back to the story. By coincidence, on Friday morning, both girls wore red and lavender striped dresses. At lunchtime, Angela raced home. When Angela came back to school, she was wearing black. On Friday afternoon, Miss Hart asked everyone to write a short poem. "Who would like to read first?" asked Miss Hart. Angela raised her hand. She stood by her desk and read, "I had a cat I could not see, because it stayed in the back of me. It was a very loyal pet. It's sad we never really met." "That was very good," said Miss Hart. "Now who's next?" Miss Hart looked around the room. "Ruby?" Ruby stood and recited slowly, "I had a nice pet who I never met, because it always stayed behind me, and I'm sure it was a cat too." Ruby smiled at the back of Angela's head. Someone whispered. Ruby sat down. "What a coincidence," murmured Miss Hart. Angela scribbled something on a piece of paper. She passed it to Ruby, and the note said, "You copied me. I'm telling me, Miss Hart. P.S. I do not like your hair that way." Ruby buried her chin in the collar of her blouse. A big tear rolled down her nose and plopped onto the note. When the bell rang, Miss Hart sent everyone home except Ruby. Miss Hart closed the door of the schoolroom and sat on the edge of Ruby's desk. Ruby dear, she said gently, you don't need to copy everything Angela does. You can be anything you want to be, but be Ruby first. I like Ruby. Miss Hart smiled at Ruby, and Ruby smiled at Miss Hart's beautiful polished fingernails. Have a nice weekend, said Miss Hart. Have a nice weekend, said Ruby. On Monday morning, Miss Hart said, I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend. I did. I went to the opera. Miss Hart looked around the room. Does anyone have something to share? Ruby waved her hand. Glued to every finger was a pink plastic fingernail. I went to the opera too, said Ruby. She did not, whispered Angela. Miss Hart folded her hands and looked very serious. So, class, how did Angela and Miss Hart begin to feel about Ruby copying them? Can I get 2 volunteers to maybe share what they infer? All right, now talk in your tables, and each of you kind of share about what you think is going to happen at the end of the story. Okay, let's finish the story here. Ruby dear, said Miss Hart gently, did you do anything else this weekend? Ruby peeled off a fingernail. I hopped, said Ruby. The class giggled. Ruby's ears turned red. But I did. I hopped around the picnic table 10 times. Ruby looked around the room. Watch. Ruby sprang from her desk. She hopped forward. She hopped backward. She hopped sideways with both eyes shut. The class cheered and clapped their hands to the beat of Ruby's feet. Ruby was the best hopper they had ever seen. Miss Hart turned on the tape player and said, Follow the leader. Do the Ruby hop. So Ruby led the class around the room while everyone copied her. And at noon, Ruby and Angela hopped home for lunch. All right. Any questions? Awesome. Okay. So now I want everyone to take out their book of choice, whether it was their AR book, personal book, a class book, or a new book. If you don't have one or you want a new one to do for the assignment, please go do that now from our bookshelf. Okay. I've already handed out everyone's exit ticket. Please use a pencil and write your name and write the name of the book on the top of your organizer. I'd like for everyone to read 1 chapter or 10 pages of your book of choice. And then I want you to fill in 5 or more inferences you make while you read that book. When you're finished, please raise your hand and I will check and discuss with you. Complete the exit ticket I give you, and then you can silent read. All right, class, you guys all did really good on that assignment and exit ticket I gave you. So now let's review our lesson for the day. What is predicting? What is inferring? All right, good job, guys. You guys all did awesome, and I'm confident you understand what an inference is, and you will be able to use it further on in our class. Have a good lunch and recess, and make sure to turn in your exit ticket when you leave the classroom for lunch.